Breaking right now on MSNBC, new revelations this morning about just how far former President Donald Trump was willing to go to stay in power.
Trump reportedly plotted to fire his acting attorney general in the waning days of his presidency and then replace him with someone willing to pressure Georgia officials to overturn their election results.
And now we have a date for Trump's Senate impeachment trial. The Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer announcing overnight the trial will officially begin the week of February 8th, marking the first time a U.S. president goes on trial after leaving office.
The January 6th insurrection at the Capitol, incited by Donald J. Trump, was a day none of us will ever forget. But healing and unity will only come if there is truth and accountability. And that is what this trial will provide.
The trial also threatening to overshadow President Biden's agenda as he signs a swath of executive orders, many of them undoing Trump-era policies. Also new this morning.
Did you ever consider quitting?
Always. I mean, why would you want to put yourself through that every day?
I had pressure put on me, but I resisted it. And I had to do something that was not comfortable, but I did it.
Dr. Anthony Fauci and Dr. Deborah Birx opening up about their time working in the Trump administration. Fauci revealing he was blocked from appearing on the Rachel Maddow show. As we do say, good morning, everyone. It is Saturday, January 23rd. I'm Candace Gibson.
I'm Lindsay Reiser. We are live here from MSNBC headquarters in New York, and it really is so striking to see both of them talking so freely after months of being asked these same questions but not being able to say
It's like they just got out of a bad relationship, and they're like, you know.
You have no idea how bad it was. We have a team of reporters following the latest for you right now in D.C. and around the world.
Yes, we do. We're going to start in D.C. with NBC News White House correspondent Monica Alba, who's covering the Biden administration. First time getting to say that. The Biden administration, and NBC's Heidi Przybyla, who's following the Senate impeachment trial. Let's start with Monica right now. Good morning. First on that breaking news from overnight from the New York Times and the Washington Post, for that matter, laying out the revelations of what was happening in those last few days there at DOJ. What happened?
Yeah, well, former President Donald Trump wanted to continue to push his baseless claims of election fraud, and the New York Times and the Washington Post are reporting that that plot even went as so far as to, in Georgia specifically, the former president wanted to potentially oust the acting attorney general, who at that time was Jeffrey Rosen, again, in an attempt to continue these completely unfounded claims. The former president wanted to see if, particularly in that state, the results could be overturned by pressuring state lawmakers. Of course, we know that's something that didn't happen. And the way that Donald Trump wanted to do this was by using a lawyer named Jeffrey Clark, who was somebody who apparently, according to this reporting in the papers, was open to some of these possibilities of irregularities when, again, there was no evidence of that. But now we are hearing back from Jeffrey Rosen and from Jeffrey Clark, who are both denying this account, saying that this plot is not true. There was no plan to oust Rosen from the Department of Justice. They have incredible details about the specifics in all of these meetings and ways that President Trump at the time was asking Department of Justice officials to come to the White House and meet with him, again, to push these claims for, of course, we know there has been no evidence. So President Trump is not at all commenting on this in any manner because, of course, he's out of office and he doesn't have any way to respond, including a lack of a Twitter account or other social media platforms. We haven't heard any kind of response yet, though, on this particular story from the Biden White House, guys.
Heidi, let's look ahead. We still have this looming Senate impeachment trial, and the date has now been set. Walk us through the timeline here.
Yeah, let's walk through the mechanics. So on Monday, you will see the House impeachment managers physically walk that article of impeachment across the Capitol, across the Rotunda Statuary Hall to the Senate. Then the Senate, the impeachment manager, Jamie Raskin, will read that impeachment article on the floor of the Senate on Tuesday, a day later. The members in the Senate will all be sworn in as jurors for that trial. And then we will have until February 2nd for the former president to issue his answer to that impeachment article. At that point, there will be about a 2-week grace period, which is the time frame that was agreed upon between now Senate Minority Leader Mitch McConnell and Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer. So the trial then would start about February 9th, Lindsay. And according to a lot of the senators and Senate aides who I'm talking to, at this point, there does not seem to be the 17 members, Republican members there, needed to convict. However, the Democrats who are preparing this trial say that this is such a unique situation where you have the jury, the entire jury pool here in the Senate, who are the actual witnesses. These are the individuals who experienced what happened during that riot. In fact, they were, some of them, the targets of those rioters. And so even though we'll have this grace period here of a couple of weeks, the impeachment managers are hoping to kind of use a lot of visuals, a lot of video and testimonials to kind of bring that day back into vivid color for a lot of these members. Now, the big difference here also between this impeachment trial and the previous impeachment trial exactly a year ago is that the Senate Minority Leader, who was then Majority Leader Mitch McConnell, had pretty much shut the door on the hopes of any kind of a conviction, whereas this time, Senate Minority Leader Mitch McConnell has said, yeah, the president did help incite some of this. He was not a good actor in this, and he's not said how he thinks members should vote. He's not said whether he thinks there should be a conviction. And so there is some hope among Democrats that maybe this time things will be a little bit different. But again, that 17 vote threshold, that's a really tough hill to climb.
Yeah, he's telling his members, vote with your own conscience. I'm not going to tell you how to vote. Monica, we'd be remiss if we didn't mention amid all of this, there's this raging pandemic after seemingly months of inaction by the Trump administration when he seemed more concerned with overturning the election results rather than addressing the coronavirus. President Biden now, he has a slurry of executive actions on this, vowing wartime action, in fact, against coronavirus, especially now there are fears that this UK variant could be more deadly than originally thought.
Exactly, Lindsay. And one of the first people in this administration to talk about the potential for that deadly variant was Dr. Anthony Fauci, who, of course, served in the last administration as he did the past 6 presidents. President Biden is now the 7th that he is working under. And he came to the podium and took questions in that White House press briefing so early on in a show that this White House wants to lead, according to them, with the science and the data. And that's exactly what both President Biden and Dr. Fauci intend to do. They're closely monitoring this UK variant that we do know is already spreading in the United States, and they are worried about how transmissible it is. But the United States and the CDC here have not been able to weigh in yet on that question of the mortality factor. But absolutely, over the last couple of days, fighting the pandemic is a top priority for this White House. So they did have many executive orders on everything from wearing masks on federal property to ensuring that people wear masks when you have interstate travel. They're also going to be ramping up companies with this vaccine distribution question using the Defense Production Act to ensure that that supply is able to be increased, since you see in so many states already people issuing concerns about that product already running out. So that was certainly a huge topic in the first couple of days, of course, coupled with that economic relief package they hope to get through Congress. And there will be some meetings with top White House officials and lawmakers on that topic this weekend. Candace and Lindsay.
Monica Alba, Heidi Przybyla getting us started on the first weekend of the Biden administration. Thank you. And joining us right now is Roger Fisk, former aide for President Obama, and Don Baer, former White House communications director and former speechwriter for President Clinton. Good morning, both of you.
Gentlemen, good morning to you.
Good morning.
Both of your reaction to the reports from overnight that the former President Trump plotted to oust acting Attorney General Jeffrey Rosen and replace him with someone who would help pursue those baseless election fraud claims. Roger, would this potentially play any role in the upcoming impeachment trial?
First off, Candace and Lindsay, good morning, and thanks so much for having me. I've long maintained that the president's culpability in this predate January 6th, and now with these reports, we know that even on January 3rd, the same day that he made that infamous call to Secretary of State Raffensperger, that he was vigorously working the phones and looking at intensely anti-democratic options around this. So even if he had not made a speech on the south lawn of the White House on January 6th at all, I still think he would have the same problems. For months, he poured gasoline on this. There's a reason why everyone ended up coming to Washington, D.C. on January 6th, and there's a reason why he riled them up for months, which was to get this all up to a boil and then to push it up Pennsylvania Avenue. And when you combine the insurrection mob with the phone calls he's making, you would see a very clear picture. And then last, we also know from people like Senator Lee that up until 2:30 and 2:45 on January 6th, he was still working the phones to congressional leaders while the insurrection was occurring within the Capitol. So his fingerprints are all over this, and this is just going to get more difficult. There's no way in the world this story gets any better for him.
That one article for impeachment is incitement, but the impeachment managers did mention that call with Brad Raffensperger, of course, the Secretary of State of Georgia, in which he pressured him to find votes. This reporting that Candace was mentioning also indicates a number of department officials who threatened to resign if this happened. That ultimately persuaded Trump to keep Rosen in place. So, Don, the question to you is, are you surprised that that sort of informal pact swayed Trump?
Look, with Donald Trump, we know there's never a bottom. Every time you think you've gotten to the worst thing he could possibly have done, we hear more things. And I'm not surprised that it persuaded him, because I've been hearing these kinds of stories for 4 and 5 years about how cabinet secretaries and sub-cabinet secretaries would have to go to him and walk him back, talk him out of some pretty extreme activity. But here's the thing. The trial in the Senate is a much more fluid and dynamic situation than we realize at this point. Mitch McConnell has told his members, vote your conscience. I think it will not be beyond the pale that Mitch McConnell will vote to convict Donald Trump. And this is not the last thing, in my view, that we're going to hear about. It's February 9th before this trial actually starts, and there's plenty of time for more reporting to come out, and I think it's going to be persuasive to more and more Republican senators.
I want to pick up on that with Roger, because we have the reporting as well that Mitch McConnell behind the scene privately has said that he just wants Trump gone. Might this persuade enough Republicans, Roger, in your view, that Republicans will want to vote to convict?
It very well could. Obviously, the Senate Minority Leader is thinking about 2022, and he's thinking about a enraged, empowered Trump, completely untethered from the responsibilities of office. And one could make a case for the fact that he's been untethered from the responsibilities of office for quite some time now. But out there, ginning up primary challengers, the Senate map is tilted in the Democrats' favor in 2022 just by virtue of who's up in that particular cycle. So I think for the Minority Leader, he's looking at this as, is there a way to marginalize Trump and look at his incumbents in 22, because the last thing he wants is a repeat of what we saw in 2014 and 2016, when they nominate a bunch of people that are so completely off the mainstream kind of radar that they lose a Missouri, that they lose some of those states that if they just hold on to their incumbents, they should feel pretty confident that they can hold on to.
All right, we'll leave it there with Roger Fisk and Don Barrett. Gentlemen, thank you so much for being here with us. Appreciate it. Enjoy the rest of your Saturday. It is one of the first controversies of Joe Biden's early term. These pictures of National Guard troops sleeping in a parking garage on a cold day in D.C., one day after the inauguration. In fact, an update on their situation and the new problem that they're now dealing with.
Not how you want to reward people who are making such a sacrifice. Plus, short supply. New York City is having to postpone COVID vaccination appointments as it runs dangerously low on doses. And this morning, Ali Velshi takes an inside look at the Biden administration's ambitious agenda for the first 100 days of his presidency. Watch Inside the Biden Agenda today at 8 a.m. Eastern, only on MSNBC.
To those thousands of troops in Washington, D.C. on guard duty, protecting the Capitol, facing a new enemy this morning, the coronavirus. More than 150 National Guard troops have tested positive for COVID-19. This comes amid an outcry that troops were forced to sleep in close quarters in a parking garage one day after the inauguration. A U.S. Capitol official familiar with the situation said the number of troops who tested positive could actually increase. President Biden called the chief of the National Guard Bureau to apologize for what they went through.
More of the Capitol rioters are being brought to justice as authorities sift through thousands of images identifying people who took part. More than 150,000 photos and videos have been reviewed, and according to the DOJ, more than 100 people have been charged federally. There are more than 300 open FBI investigations. The Biden administration is now vowing to overhaul the government's approach to domestic terror, ordering intel agencies to conduct a, quote, comprehensive threat assessment. Joining me now is former senior CIA officer Carmen Medina. And Carmen, good morning to you. Thanks so much for joining us on this. I want to get your reaction to what we just said, the sense that this new administration deems the biggest threat facing our country right now. What kind of morale rebuilding also needs to happen right now among these intelligence agencies?
Well, thanks for having me, and top of the morning to you. Well, first, I need to make very clear that the CIA is not responsible for domestic terrorism. The law is very clear on that. But the Director of National Intelligence is, and under her, she has the FBI and the Department of Homeland Security. And I think in particular, the Department of Homeland Security has been perhaps hollowed out in the last few years. Certainly, there's been a lot of scandals associated with it. It purposefully chose not to emphasize following or analyzing domestic extremism. So I think it will be a significant ramp up for the Department of Homeland Security to get smart about these issues. And you have to add on all the complicated legal factors involved in doing something like that in the U.S.
Of course, right now, security is still at an all-time high at the Capitol after the insurrection, but some Republican members of Congress are being defiant when it comes to some of the new safety protocols. Capitol Police are investigating a report that Maryland Congressman Andy Harris tried to bring a gun into the House chamber. They have those metal detectors outside now. What do you think about these safety measures and the fact that some lawmakers are trying to defy them?
Well, I think that highlights the problem that we have here in the U.S. with, well, it's not a problem. It's a great, wonderful thing that we have First and Second Amendment rights. But they can pose issues when you're trying to take action against people that are engaged in conspiratorial or criminal activity. And so if you're going to enforce these kinds of laws, then you have to enforce them equitably. And I believe Congress and the Congress people who choose to ignore these laws are setting a really bad example for the American public. And it wouldn't surprise me if some of them knowingly are setting that bad example.
Politico is reporting that the Biden team fears that this rocky transition really could just be the tip of the iceberg. The staff is worried they don't know the full scope of the problems within the executive branch. They fear that the situation there could be worse than they anticipated. What does this mean for the issues that need an immediate response, like national security, like COVID relief?
Right. Well, I think national security has always been problematic during the transition period. I think we have the issue of China, which the Trump administration left behind a poison pill by declaring their crackdown on the Uyghurs as genocidal. And I think that that's going to be a difficult thing for the Biden administration to maneuver through. I think that you have to keep your eye out on the possibility of cyber and other psychological attacks, by which I mean psychological attacks, sort of the kind of psychological operations that QAnon, for example, represents. Mm-hmm. So we distrust in the American public. And then finally, I think, there's so many surprise things that can happen in the first 90 days of the administration. I'll just give you one. North Koreans are notorious for launching missiles to commemorate their important national holidays. And April 15th, just tucked in the window of the first 100 days, is Kim Il-sung's birthday, which is a glorious holiday and often well celebrated in North Korea. So all of these things can pop up and, take unprepared a new administration.
Carmen Medina, we will have to have you back to discuss this more further. Thank you so much for joining us this morning.
You're welcome.
All right, overnight, as you slept, some stunning new revelations on Trump's attempt to weaponize the Justice Department in his last days as president. Our political panel will weigh in on those explosive reports about a desperate attempt to overturn the will of the people. Also, Steve Kornacki is back. He's going to bring us the latest on what Americans think about Joe Biden's priorities for his first 100 days in office. Man, he moves fast these days.
Diet Coke.
It must be the Diet Coke. We'll be back.
President Biden is in the Oval Office. He's beginning his term with more confidence from voters than President Trump at least had when he was sworn in. But how long will that last?
That's the question. NBC's Steve Kornacki breaks down the latest polling at the big board for us. Steve.
Well, all right, Lindsay and Candace, I think the Biden presidency is probably too young at this point where you start having the polls about job approval rating. We probably got to wait a week or two on that. But we do have some numbers about attitudes towards the new president as he enters office. Let me take you through what we know so far about what the public thinks of its new president. First of all, here's an NBC News poll. This one came out just before the inauguration. And we asked folks, does Joe Biden have the right personal characteristics to be president? 43% said they're confident that Biden has the right personal characteristics to be president. So obviously there is still some skepticism out there about Joe Biden, but you can also put this in context because this is a question we've been asking about every incoming president for a while now. And let's compare what the number is for Joe Biden right now to what the number has been for some recent presidents as they've come into office. So the most recent president, Donald Trump, in 2017, when he was coming into office, you could see here the number was significantly lower. Biden's 43 now. Only 32% of folks thought that Donald Trump had the right personal characteristics to be president. This was as he was being sworn in. So Biden is, 11 points higher than that. And then here are the other sort of modern presidents we've asked this question about. And again, you can see a range here. Look, Obama was up at nearly 60%. There was the most confidence there that folks had in him at the beginning of his presidency. Bush and Clinton there in the 40s. Biden is basically in that same range where George W. Bush and where Bill Clinton were. So again, that's the personal characteristics to be president. Something else that's been asked here is just, this is that question of, do you have a positive or negative view of Joe Biden, of Donald Trump, of the Democratic Party, of the Republican Party? Been asking this question pretty consistently, and you can see again, as Trump leaves office, a majority with a negative view of him. That's been true for a while now in the polling. He's been upside down on this question, pretty much throughout his presidency. Joe Biden with a slightly, you see 44 to 40, slightly positive, more positive than negative view. And again, that's pretty consistent with what we saw back during the campaign when you would ask this same question during the Trump-Biden campaign, positive, negative. This is about where Biden was too. And you see the Democratic Party itself, both parties are upside down, but the Republican Party much more upside down, 29-51, than the Democratic Party. One other thing here, the basic mood of the country as Joe Biden takes office, the right track, wrong track. What's the direction of the country? Are we going in the right track or the wrong track? And you can see here, wow, 73%, nearly 3 out of 4 Americans think we are going in the wrong, on the wrong track right now. And again, compare this to some recent presidencies, the starting point. Go back to Donald Trump. When Donald Trump was taking office in January 2017, the mood in the country was not as dark. It was 37% who said we were on the right track. Then now it's 21%. Hey, go back to January 2009. The financial crisis, the meltdown, Wall Street, the Great Recession was beginning. This is when Barack Obama took office. Even then, 26% thought the country was on the right track. So again, that 21% number, obviously in the middle of a pandemic, I guess it's not too shocking, but that's the mood of the country as Joe Biden takes over.
We brought Steve back to cheer us up.
Sure.
Steve Kornacki, thank you so much.
73% of Americans think we're on the wrong track.
We've got some fixing to do.
We have a lot of work to do. Oh, all right. Well, let's continue. We're following those reports this morning of a devised plot that would have led to a major shakeup at the Department of Justice. Former President Donald Trump and DOJ lawyer Jeffrey Clark apparently plotted to oust the acting Attorney General Jeffrey Rossen, according to reporting from the New York Times and the Washington Post. The plan would see Rossen replaced by Clark, who would then use the DOJ's powers to pressure Georgia state lawmakers into overturning its own election results in further pursuit of those baseless claims of election fraud. Top DOJ officials reportedly said they would collectively resign if that plan went ahead, which apparently persuaded Trump to drop it. Jeffrey Clark has denied the allegations. For more on all of this, and bringing in the MSNBC political contributor and former Republican Florida Congressman David Jolly and Democratic strategist Bernard Whitman. Gentlemen, thank you. Good morning and welcome.
Good morning.
Never a dull day. David, are Republicans going to be under more pressure at this point now to try to hold Trump accountable now with this report that's out?
Yeah, look, I think more evidence could still come out, and there's no surprise in this story, right? We kind of knew that Donald Trump was doing this. He was trying to do this in plain sight. We're just getting one more piece of evidence that the House managers in the impeachment trial will certainly use to make their case. I do think that Mitch McConnell's request to delay this 2 weeks, and frankly, it may have been coordinated quietly with the Democratic side of the aisle, but it puts Donald Trump in a harder spot, not an easier spot. And look, if Mitch McConnell votes to convict, which indications are he very well might, I think you see at least another 10 to 12 Republicans immediately join that vote to convict, and you get pretty close to an actual conviction for the first time of a president of the United States.
Wow, that's interesting that you say that. Bernard, in the meantime, the House is set to deliver an impeachment article come Monday. Just a quick look at the timeline right now. The trial could actually start on February 9th, but more Republicans are expressing confidence that Trump might actually be acquitted, despite what David said just there. But we have several weeks ahead, and as David mentioned, a lot could come out. What does this news, though, about the DOJ do for Trump's impeachment, in your opinion? Bernard.
Unity, ability, and action. I believe the three watchwords for this administration are unity, accountability, and action. We must hold the president accountable for the crimes that he is alleged to commit against American people. Quite frankly, if we do not have accountability with unity, that's an invitation to lawlessness and an abrogation of responsibility. If we don't have unity without action, it's an invitation to abandon the plight of our fellow man. We must actually seek to convict and ultimately bar Donald Trump from serving in office. I think, frankly, we're not only doing a favor to the democracy of America and to the American society, but doing a favor to the Republican Party. The quicker the Republican Party can get Donald Trump behind them, frankly, the better off they are. If they want to continue to debate and discuss and live with this monster for another 4 years, I think that's going to spell tremendous difficulty for the party to coalesce and move forward, which I think is actually good for democracy. We need a two-party system, and to have Donald Trump remain in the shadow of the Republican Party for the next 4 years is going to be an invitation to disaster.
And apparently that's along the lines of what McConnell is saying behind the scenes. But let's talk about the unity part that you brought up there with David, because President Biden's efforts for bipartisanship is already proving to be more of a challenge, with McConnell trying to fight the filibuster and other Republicans like House Minority Leader Kevin McCarthy, who's still trying to cling to support for Trump. He contradicted himself, actually, from earlier in the week about Trump's role in the Capitol Hill insurrection. Take a listen.
He should have immediately denounced the mob when he saw what was unfolding.
McConnell has said that former President Trump and other important people provoked those folks to come to the Capitol. Do you believe that former President Trump provoked?
I don't believe he provoked if you listen to what he said at the rally.
Senator Lindsey Graham, who I would never take on in a game of Twister, I can't bend that much, is another one who rushed to Trump's defense. Is this just more Republican hypocrisy?
It's more than that, and I'm going to make a moral judgment here, because I served with Kevin McCarthy, and he is the Republican leader in the House of Representatives, and he's asked for the opportunity to hold the public trust and be judged by the public. That was a despicable moment by Kevin McCarthy. Let's not mince words. I served with Kevin. He's a raw political animal. When John Boehner resigned and Kevin wanted to be Speaker, I wouldn't give him my vote. And for the remainder of my term, he wouldn't look me in the eye. He wouldn't speak to me. He is a raw political animal who is suffering the blowback that Liz Cheney is suffering, that Mitch McConnell is suffering, by tiptoeing to the line of suggesting that Donald Trump somehow has culpability in the events of January 6th. And where Cheney and McConnell have at least owned that statement and doubled down on it and suggested there's a fight for the heart and soul of the party, Kevin McCarthy, the raw political animal, felt the heat and tried to get out of the kitchen. But by turning it on the rest of the American people, that's the Republican leader of the House blaming the American people for an insurrection when it lies with the heart of one movement, and it is Trumpism.
We'll leave it there. former Congressman David Jolly and Bernard Whitman. Gentlemen, thank you so much for being here this early.
Is that game of Twister still around?
It is still around somewhere. Political Twister, I can't contort quite to that level.
All right, coming up, it is a race, of course, nobody wants to be first in. Now, a new state takes the lead over California for the country's worst COVID infection rate. Plus, security is at an all-time high at our nation's capital, and for good reason. So why are outside the chamber? One of them, Congressman Van Taylor, joins us at 7 a.m. Eastern, and we will ask him that. That's in our next hour.
We're back now with a look at the top headlines that we're watching at this hour. Federal judge says the Treasury Department must give Donald Trump 72 hours notice before it turns over his federal tax returns to Congress. Now, Trump's lawyers requested the hearing in order to clarify how House Democrats' lawsuit over their tax return request would actually proceed under the Biden administration. The court order will last for 2 weeks.
Senators from both sides of the aisle got together Friday to introduce a bill that would award this man, a hero, Capitol Police Officer Eugene Goodman, with a Congressional Gold Medal for these actions during the January 6th attack at the Capitol. You see there, he was leading rioters away from the Senate chamber. He was also appointed to escort Kamala Harris on Inauguration Day. The Congressional Gold Medal is one of the highest awards a civilian can receive.
Good for him. And the odds, 1 in 302 million, beyond slim. But one lucky person in Michigan, or as I refer to them this morning, my cousin, managed to hit the jackpot-winning Friday night's $1 billion Mega Millions drawing, the third largest jackpot in U.S. history.
You didn't know we go way back?
Go way back. Because
remember that time I helped you out?
It's $1 billion Mega Millions drawing, the third largest jackpot in U.S. history.
You didn't know we go way back?
Go way back. Because
remember that time I helped you out? Remember that time I helped you out?
It's $1 billion Mega Millions drawing, the third largest jackpot in U.S. history.
You didn't know we go way back?
Go way back. Because
remember that time I helped you out? Congressional Gold Medal for these actions during the January 6th attack at the Capitol. You see there, he was leading rioters away from the Senate chamber. Kamala Harris on Inauguration Day. The Congressional Gold Medal is one of the highest awards a civilian can receive.
Good for him. And the odds, 1 in 302 million, beyond slim. But one lucky person in Michigan, or as I refer to them this morning, my cousin, managed to hit the jackpot-winning Friday night's $1 billion Mega Millions drawing, the third largest jackpot in U.S. history.
You didn't know we go way back?
Go way back. Because
remember that time I helped you out? All right, now let's go to the latest on the coronavirus pandemic. The U.S. has added more than 190,000 new cases as of Friday, bringing the total to nearly 25 million. More than 19 million Americans have now gotten the vaccine. In the last week, nearly 1 million doses were administered. Arizona has surpassed California as the state with the worst coronavirus infection rate. The Department of Health Services reported 9,000 additional cases Friday, taking the state's total to more than 708,000. Meanwhile, Pfizer is shipping fewer COVID vaccine vials to the U.S. after the Trump administration changed the FDA labeling, saying 6 doses, not 5, can now be drawn from each vial. The change comes as states complain that they're running out of shots. As the new administration grapples to take over the botched rollout of the COVID vaccine, officials in New York City are warning the vaccine supply could run out as early as this weekend. MSNBC's Corey Coffin is in Queens. And Corey, New York City has had to postpone some 22,000 vaccines this week.
Yeah, it's a horrific timeline to think about, Lindsay. Some 22,000 postponements to the following week. And if this issue persists, that means it's going to continue to push back thousands of other appointments and have a horrible domino effect for the city. And then, of course, you have these mass vaccination sites opening up, like here at the Aqueduct Racetrack where we're at in Queens. We were out at Jones Beach last week. So what gives, basically? What's the deal with these mass vaccination sites opening up? The state of New York really ramping up their vaccination efforts, but yet there's just not enough supply coming in. Mayor de Blasio spoke to that recently.
We believed the supply would increase over time as more and more production was ramped up. And what we found was it leveled off just when we were able to do more and more vaccinations is when things leveled off.
And then you, of course, have the added layer of the state opening up the vaccine pool so that some 7 million people are now eligible to receive the vaccine, of obviously more people now waiting to get that vaccine because of that. Now, the city of New York has administered about half of the vaccines that they have been given. They've been given about 1 million. They've got about 500,000 in arms of folks right now. Governor Cuomo is so desperate at this point to get more vaccinations and more vaccine vials here to the state of New York. He went so far as to write a letter to Pfizer asking if he could buy the vaccine from them directly. Unfortunately, Pfizer says they have to have government approval for that, so that's not likely to happen. But we do know the Biden administration is really trying to take the reins on this and completely overhaul the federal rollout plan, as well as institute several executive orders in order to get more vaccine, including that Defense Production Act, which would hopefully ramp up production of the vaccine. And as we know, a possible third vaccine approval coming through Johnson & Johnson, hopefully in weeks, not months. That's according to Dr. Anthony Fauci. Lindsay, get us.
Corey Coffin, we've got to do better. Corey, thank you so much for that report. And by the way, today, Dr. Anthony Fauci joins Alex Witt live to discuss the latest on the pandemic and the vaccine rollout under the new Biden administration. Watch Weekends with Alex Witt starting today at noon Eastern on MSNBC.
Now to some breaking news from overseas. In Russia, hundreds have been detained as people take to the streets across the country in support of Putin's biggest critic and opposition leader, Alexei Navalny, is in Moscow right now with the latest on those protests that are taking place. Matt, good morning to you. Are you seeing now, what are you seeing now during the protests? Are protesters actually facing any opposition from the law?
Good morning. Yeah, so we're about 500 meters now from Pushkin Square, and this is the central location that Navalny and his team traditionally will call these protests. We've had to retreat just because so many people are showing up, and it's actually pretty significant coronavirus risk. We've also been running into signal issues, possibly from just the sheer amount of people that have come out to this, or maybe some interference from the authorities. We're not in a position to confirm that one way or the other at the moment. But basically, this is all or nothing for Mr. Navalny and his team, and we have seen some police presence. They're out here in their full riot gear, large squads of them. We've passed quite a few as we retreated away from that square. We've witnessed several arrests as we were doing that, but so far we haven't seen a large-scale crackdown. But we're just standing here on the main street in Moscow leading up to that square, and beyond it, the Kremlin, and people are pouring in from every direction, and this looks like it's already the largest protest action that we've seen in Moscow, possibly since 2013. It's certainly the biggest that I've ever seen here. So it looks to be basically the statement that Mr. Navalny was hoping for today. This protest is really all about freeing Mr. Navalny and showing the Kremlin, in Mr. Navalny's words, that the people are not afraid.
Are they trying to take everybody in at this point? What's happening?
At this point, no. It seems like most people are just walking around freely. On the square itself, they're running a loudspeaker, basically asking people to disperse because of coronavirus measures. They're telling everyone to wear masks and practice social distancing. And when we were still there, we witnessed the cops will dive into the crowd of protesters and seemingly pluck them out at random. But they certainly do have the equipment out on the streets today to go for larger scale arrests, if that's what they choose to do. The entire square is surrounded right now with these large police buses where they just will wrap up large groups and throw them in. So it's still early in the day, but could go that way.
Yeah, it's just after midday right there in Moscow and much of Russia. Our thanks to Matt Bodner there on the breaking news on those protests, anti-Putin protests taking place there. Thank you. Well, Joe Biden is planning a sweeping immigration overhaul despite resistance from Senate Republicans. Will Biden's plan undermine his pledge for unity?
And later on the Cross Connection, House Impeachment Manager Eric Swalwell and Senator Mazie Hirono will join Tiffany Cross to talk impeachment round 2. That's coming up today at 10 a.m. Eastern, only on MSNBC. And Biden is taking immediate action to reverse many of Donald Trump's immigration policies, signing executive orders that halt construction of the southern border wall, end the Muslim travel ban, and pause deportations for certain non-citizens. He also sent a sweeping immigration proposal to Congress that would provide a pathway to citizenship for undocumented immigrants living in the U.S.
But his immigration plan is already meeting resistance from some key Senate Republicans, with Senate aides expressing skepticism over its path to win over Republicans. Well, joining us right now is the president and CEO of the National Immigration Forum, Ali Noorani. Ali, thank you for being here, and good morning to you. You get a sense, do you think that Biden can reach across the aisle and actually get this proposal passed, or is this pretty much dead on arrival?
Well, it's interesting because immigration actually is one of the few issues out there that has enjoyed years and years of bipartisan support. Every time we've seen a significant immigration reform piece of legislation move forward, Republicans and Democrats figure out a way to find a compromise. You know, these days, you know, Senator Lindsey Graham from South Carolina, Senator Thom Tillis from North Carolina, Senator Jim Lankford from Oklahoma, all three, you know, very conservative Republicans have a very recent history of engaging on immigration reform in a constructive way. And this is an incredible opportunity for them to tell their voters and tell the country, we've got to figure out this problem.
Well, some Republicans who got behind a similar bipartisan effort some 8 years ago, they're now criticizing this plan, including Senators Rubio and Graham. Why do you think they've reversed course here?
Well, it's interesting because, I mean, Senator Rubio, you know, he's up for re-election in 2022, so I imagine he's trying to figure out his path to victory. But this is the opportunity for Republicans. You know, they can put forward their own proposal. Now, of course, as a nation, whether it's Congress or the White House, job number one needs to be to beat this pandemic and get the economy going. But let's start that process now, and Republicans can put their ideas on the table. During the Obama administration, we were always wondering, when is President Obama going to put his proposal on the table? Well, President Biden has said, you know what? This is my vision. Republicans, what is yours?
All right, so what are we, a few days into the new Biden administration, and already you have the Texas Attorney General, Ken Paxton, who is suing Biden over his order to halt deportations. And you get a sense that you have these growing Republican resistance that's growing. So with that said, do Democrats need to lower their expectations for the immigration bill?
Well, actually, I think Democrats need to be talking to the broad American public. So if we look at the 2018 midterm elections, suburban voters, suburban conservative voters, pushed